Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Journey with Me podcast, where the journey is greater than the destination. I, of course, am your host, Holly Harris, your journey girl, helping you to manage the middle. And on today's episode, I want to talk about something that every person at some point in their journey is going to have to deal with, and that is separating your who from your do. And what I mean by that is basically separating who you are from what you do. Okay. And how sometimes that can get intertwined. And I know for myself, it has definitely been a journey for me as it relates to separating the two, because I am a goal oriented person. And this is particularly prevalent amongst a lot of us who are goal oriented and who like to be productive and who, live life in such a way that you want to get a lot of things accomplished. And so I wanted to talk about that today. Just the how difficult it can sometimes be to separate the two and how important it is to separate the two, right? And so now there was a point in my journey where I was confronted with this head on. I can remember going to a party. It was a New Year's Eve party, right? And it was basically a bunch of girlfriends getting together, having food, fellowship. The vision boards were involved because this was during the time where there was this big push towards doing a vision board. And so that was involved. And I remember sitting around the table talking with a group of ladies, and one of them, turned to me and said, "Who are you?" And when she asked me the question, it just kind of was like, what do you mean who I am? What do you mean, who am I? Right? I began to think about all of the things that I do when she asked me that question, like, oh, I do this, I do that. And she was like, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. I'm asking, who are you? That's what you do. Who are you? And so it really kind of got my wheels turning in that moment. And in that moment, I basically told her, you know what? I don't know. It was an honest answer at the time, but somewhat sad at the same time because I really, at that point, could not pinpoint who I was beyond what I did. And so that started a journey for me of uncovering, okay, once I peel back, what I do, who am I really on the inside? And so I wanted to ask you this question, just pose it to you so you can kind of get your wheels turning and begin thinking about this. If you could create a statement that sums up who you are without using what you do, what would it say? What would that statement say about who you were, right? And so this is just, it's a question to kind of get your wheels turning if you have not already separated that and understand at the base level who you are. I'm hoping that this question will begin the conversation in your mind to uncovering what that is. And so I wanted to kind of dig into some things today because, just as I said before, um, this can be prevalent amongst, us people who are goal oriented, as well as with all of the talk, all of the classes, the courses, the push towards discovering your purpose, discovering who you are, this, that, and the third, discovering your gifts. It can exacerbate this even more to where we get more caught up in what we do versus who we are. And so I wanted to, again, just kind of touch on this a little bit. And I want to use as a scripture base to kind of help us break this down, the story of Naaman, who was healed from leprosy. And that's found in 2 Kings chapter 5. And there's no better story. There may be other stories, but this is a great story that really illustrates a person that is more in tune with what they do. Okay. And so I'll begin reading at verse 1 and go through to verse 14. So hang in there with me. I'm going to try to read it quickly. Okay. Okay. Verse 1 says, Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Naaman's wife, right? Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, and this is, someone going in to tell Naaman what was said. Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel, right? And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. Verse 7, And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. So this is the king who is basically saying, hey, why are you guys sending me this letter to heal this guy? Because he kind of was, his perception of it was that it would end up starting, uh, trouble between him and that other king. Because he was not able to fulfill this request. So he tears his clothes, right? Um, and so verse 8 says, And it was so when Elijah, the man of God, had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariots and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hands over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned away and went away in rage. Verse 13 says, And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went he down and dipped 7 times in Jordan, according to the sayings of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Okay, and so that was verses 1 through 14. See, I got through it quick. So let's go back to verse 1, right? We see that Naaman, right? First of all, he is the captain of the hosts of the king of Syria. He's considered to be a great man, an honorable man, a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper, right? And could it be that Naaman's accomplishments were just a cover for his medical issues? Because just looking at this, Naaman could be perceived as being an overachiever, you know, and this is one sign that you may be more in tune with what you do versus who you are when you are an overachiever. And a lot of times we overachieve because there is something beneath the surface, some deficit, some insecurity, something that doesn't make us feel whole, something that makes us feel like we're lacking in some way. And we begin to fill that hole with accomplishments. We begin to fill that hole with goals. We begin to fill that hole with all sorts of things because there is a deficit somewhere, or at least we feel like there is a deficit somewhere. So we see that Naaman is all of these things, but he's also a leper, right? So that's one sign that can signify to you that you may be a little bit more in tune with what you do versus who you are, right? And then the next thing that could be a clue that you're more in tune with what you do is that you get excited about being booked and busy. You know, we're in this booked and busy culture, and this is akin to also being an overachiever, but you get your value or your importance from how sought after you are. Like you're the one who always gets invited to the parties. All, you know, you're getting engagements, you're getting, you know, contracts or whatever it is, but you're booked and you're busy, and you get your value from that. You get a sense of importance from that. That is somewhat of a clue that you may be more in tune with what you do versus who you are, right? And again, that's akin to being an overachiever, but we are in this culture where everybody's trying to be productive, everybody's trying to accomplish things. And like I said before, you know, those of us who are goal oriented and who love being productive, we are very susceptible to being ones who are more in tune with what we do versus who we are. Okay, so it's important that we kind of keep an eye out for those clues. And then the next thing that can be a clue is that we try to do things in our own strength. If we go back to the story of Naaman, right? There comes a point in time to where he hears about this healing, and he gets his money together. He's about to buy his healing. He's wanting to get this done, you know, do it in his own strength. You know, he gets the king to write a letter for him and all of the things. You know, he wants to do this in his own strength. He's bringing his money with him. And this is what happens when we are more in sync with what we do versus who we are, right? And Naaman not only brought money, but according to the Bible commentary, the background commentary, the money that he brought together, which was 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 talents of silver, was equivalent to $750 million in today's money. Isn't that crazy? Like, he was willing to pay top dollar to get his healing, okay? Especially when he felt as though that the king would be able to do it, because he was like, okay, I can't bring him just anything. But we see him trying to do things in his own strength. And that can be a clue that we're more in tune with what we do versus who we are, right? And then trying to prove yourself to others. If we go down to verse let's see, number 9, it says, so Naaman came with his horses and with his chariots and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. You know, Naaman came with all of the pomp and circumstance. He came, you know, in all of his glory and all of his splendor. Right, you know, it's almost like he was trying to prove something, you know, to Elijah, like, look at who I am, look at who the man I am. And this can happen a lot of times. This is a clue that we are more in tune with what we do versus who we are when we are constantly trying to prove ourselves to others, right? When we're constantly, you know, flashing what we have, or, you know, bragging about what we do, we are then more in tune with what we do than who we are. right? And so what's interesting here, so we talked about the overachievers, those of us who are, booked and busy, when we try to do things in our own strength, and then when we try to prove ourselves to others, right? So if we read further down, what's interesting is the procedure by which Naaman goes through in order to receive his healing, right? First of all, according to the Bible commentary, Samaria was about 40 miles away. So it wasn't an easy journey for him to get to Elisha's house, first of all, right? Secondly, there's a dipping that took place in order for him to receive his healing. What was interesting, there's a whole history surrounding dipping in this region. And I'm going to read a little bit of it out of the Bible commentary because I thought it was really interesting as to why this particular procedure was used. And so it says, in the Mesopotamian Naburbi rituals, protective purification is accomplished by dipping seven times in the river facing upstream and seven times facing downstream. This ritual was also releasing gifts for the god Ea into the river. The flowing water was believed to carry the impurities to the netherworld. Again, Elisha's chosen procedures are ones that would ring a note of familiarity to those who lived in this world of magical rituals. On the medical level, there are a number of locations in Israel near Tiberias that boast of hot springs capable of restoring healthy skin from any number of conditions. Nevertheless, the text refers specifically to the Jordan River, which could not be confused with the mineral springs, right? And so this is interesting here that Elijah chooses a procedure that is uh, familiar to him, familiar to this region. This was something that they did in magical rituals, right? And so Elijah uses this, but of course, God is the one that is performing the healing this time, but he uses something that he's familiar with in order for him to receive his healing. And then as I continue reading, like it goes into verse number and when we go into verse number 11, where it talks about when Naaman was angry, and he went away, and it says, "Behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord as God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper." Right. And so again, he's expecting all of these theatrics. And when I read in the Bible commentary for that verse, it says Naaman obviously had expected different methods to be used. The elevation of the hand, here elevation preferred rather than waving, often accompanied invocations and incantations. Praying with a raised hand is referred to in the Aramaic Zukur inscription and is depicted in numerous reliefs, right hand, palm inward, elbow bent. There is a series of Akkadian incantations called Shulia, raising of the hand. The extant copies dates to about this period. These compositions includes invocations and praises of deity, leading up of a prayer seeking appeasement, protection, and the removal of evil. It would have been unusual in the ancient worldview for the rituals to be performed without the presence of a specialist reciting incantations accompanied by appropriate gestures and orchestrating the procedures. The absence of the specialist leads Naaman to think that any body of water could serve the purpose of cleansing. He expected Elijah, the practitioner, to make the difference. And while Elijah is careful to remove himself from such a role. And so, although he uses methods that are familiar to Naaman, he changes some things. He doesn't come out during the waving of the hand and all of these theatrics because he knew that that's what Naaman would expect. And although he tells him to go and dip, he tells him to go and do it alone. And so Elijah removes himself from the equation because, like, God, through Elijah, begins the process of breaking that off of him, breaking that um dependence on self, that dependence on who what you do, that dependence on this title. And he, in essence, humbles him and says, hey, go down to this river. I'm not going to be doing all this extra stuff over you. You're going to still get your healing, but go down there and dip yourself 7 times. And of course, after he pitches a fit, thankfully he had some level-headed people in his corner that said, hey, if he had come out and told you to do this great and marvelous thing, you would have did it, no questions asked. But because he told you to just go down there and dip, you got a problem with it. And so Naaman, of course, listens to them, and he goes down and he dips himself, and he comes back restored, right? And so in this, God is teaching him a lesson. He's humbling him. He's showing him, hey, I'm greater than any of these people around here doing incantations. Elijah didn't even have to be a part of the process. All I needed was your faith and your action of you walking down to that river to get your restoration. And so, this is a turning point for Naaman. Literally after this point, he's like, I'm not going to serve. I'm not going to offer up any more sacrifices to anybody but to the God of Israel, right? This is a turning point. This is a crossroads for him, where he moves beyond himself. He moves beyond his titles. He moves beyond, all of the things, and humbles himself and receives the healing that he so desperately needed. And so, we see this, in the story of Naaman, because, when we begin to, walk in more of what we do, we're these overachievers accomplishing all of these different things. It leads to pride. And essentially his pride had to be broken in order for him to receive his healing. And so that's why can be dangerous when we're not in touch with who we are, and we're more in touch with what we do. It's because it leads to pride. We begin to get puffed up within ourselves, and we think that we're making all this happen, you know. And then we need that wake up call that's like, no, this ain't about what you do. This ain't about what you've done, but it's about who God is, right? And so it leads to pride, it leads to us thinking that people owe us something. Naaman was like, does he know who I am? I thought for sure he would come out here and he would do all the theatrics. I done came here with my horses and my chariots. The least he could do is come out and see me, right? It leads to us thinking that people owe us something because of these great accomplishments, because of what we have done, that we somehow deserve special treatment, that we deserve, for people to fall all over us and to lay out the red carpet for us. So it's like humility goes out the window at that point. Right. And it also gives way to legalism, right? It gives way to us earning, our relationship with God, or, Naaman trying to pay for his healing, or, trying to get these big theatrics to happen. And even after this, he tries to pay Elijah, and Elijah's like, nope. But then his servant, tries to, well, not only tries, but succeeds in getting it. But then he ends up getting cursed with the same leprosy that Naaman had as a result of taking it. But yeah, but it gives way to legalism when we get so caught up in what we do versus who we are, right? And so it's so important that we are able to identify when we are getting more caught up in that, because it can lead us down to the dangerous road of pride and to legalism. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, especially like I said earlier, in this culture of Discover your purpose, discover who you are, you know, produce, get it done, do it, this, that, and the third. And it's nothing wrong with being productive. We were made to produce, but it can sometimes get to a place to where we think that this is who we are. We think that our titles are who we are, when that is not the case. We think, even the titles that we wear in our lives, whether it be wife, whether it be mother, whether it be sister, whether it be brother, whether it be father, whatever it is, we can begin to attach those things to ourselves. Now, we are all of those things, but those are just roles that we fulfill. At the base level, it's not the totality of who we are. And I want to just to leave you with this story. I can remember, like I said, that question kind of started a journey for me of uncovering, okay, who am I really? And I never forget, because of course you guys know I'm a worship leader and teacher, all of this stuff. I even have the titles on my Facebook page and the Instagram page, because you got to put like your little tagline and all of that stuff. And I have to every now and again do that check, like, okay, this is what I'm doing, but it's not who I am. But I remember in particular, like I said, when I was still on that journey, um, I was a worship leader, at a church, and where I had been serving for a really, really long time. And God called me away from there. And I never forget when I finally landed somewhere else. Um, he told me, no, I don't even want you to join the praise team. And I remember in that season just feeling like, okay, like what in the world? This is what I've always done. What are what are you talking about? And I remember him specifically whispering to me, he was like, I just want you to sit here and receive. I just want you to enjoy being my daughter. And that stuck with me as being who I am, God's daughter. That's it. And that's all I ever want to be. And so I want to encourage you to get to the root of who you are, which you are God's son, you are God's daughter. That's who you are at the root. You are his beloved. You are who he created to worship him, who he created to be in fellowship and to be in relationship with. That's who you are at the base level. And so it's important that we all uncover that, not just in a telling, because I can tell you that's who you are, but you not necessarily internalize that, or really personify that, in other words, but you still be caught up in doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? But it's a stripping away, it's a humbling that takes place, right? It's a bringing you back to yourself that has to happen in order for you to know beyond a shadow of a doubt who you are versus what you do. So I encourage you to go on that journey of discovering, of stripping things away, even if it means like, I know everybody can't, you can't strip everything away, because maybe um there is things that you do. Maybe you have a business, and of course you can't walk away from stuff like that, because that's your livelihood and different things of that nature. But take a vacation, get away from it every once in a while, is what I'm saying. Allow yourself that time away from what you do, so that you can get back in touch with who you are in its most simplistic form, right? So that you never get to a place where you're so caught up in what you do that you lose yourself, that you lose who you are. Because who you are is precious. Who you are is a daughter of God. Who you are is a son of God. All right. God bless.